congratulations on The Bay of Silence. I had the chance to sit down and watch it last night, and it is an absolutely amazing film.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's fantastic to hear from you. Thank you. I'm really grateful. Wow.
So I've had the chance to watch you on screen over the years, but if this is your first time screenwriting. Tell us a little bit about what made you decide that you wanted to join the illustrious career as a screenwriter.
Well, I've always written, I've always scribbled. I think most actors do, to be honest, because, we're always looking to research our backgrounds of our characters and to improve, often the kind of ropey lines sometimes we get. So I think it's the other side of any actor's life, and if you talk to them, it's, most people, I think, write in this business. I think the business is quite holistic, and we could all kind of cross borders, as it were, if people allow us to. But obviously, people also have certain things that they like to do, which they think they do best. And a lot of people just really love the process of acting, and it's very demanding and requires a lot of time. And so you don't often necessarily get the chance to be able to explore and find the space to be able to maybe write a script and then get to that point where you can get it financed, attach people to do it, and actually then make a movie. And some people might write something and then just sell it, but it could just sit there for many years. No one knows that that's what they've done. So in a way, that kind of happened to me. This script was optioned a couple of times, and it's very hard to produce things and raise money, especially if it's a film that's got certain themes that may not necessarily be immediately marketable, because, of course, everybody would love to make tons of money and have an action movie. And so that, I think, was the push for me to a certain extent, was I had written something and then I just felt it would be really nice to be able to get it out in the world. And I really liked the nuts and bolts of putting it together. And I have to say, I want to shout out to Sue Maslin and Joss Morehouse and Rebecca Gibney, because I was doing The Dressmaker in Melbourne in 2014 when I really made that decision to pursue it as a producer as well as a writer, and they gave me just so much support and advice. And I think seeing women in those positions of power, and of course, Kate as well, really inspired me, to be honest. So I just want to say thank you, Australia.
Definitely. What were those discussions like? Because they are such talented Australian women, and we are so proud of them. What was that? What were those discussions like, and what was it that they said that gave you that spark to take the next step?
They tended to be quite nuts and bolts discussions, actually, and also networking. Networking is always incredibly important. And Sue Maslin and I met up in Cannes sort of the year after, and she said, "Oh, go meet this person, go talk to that person." She gave me good advice about grant funding. In a way, so much of this is not really about ideals. It's more about the practicalities of going about to do things. And I think that is really actually just as important.
So what was it about this story that made you decide that you wanted to turn the novel into a screenplay? Was there something about this story that really stuck with you?
Yeah, that central moment when he has to make the impossible decision. I read the book actually in the Bay of Silence itself in Italy. I had been given it by a friend who thought I'd really like it, and Lisa at the time also was extremely well known. She'd won a lot of awards. Mike Bradford was trying to make Slow Train to Milan, which was possibly her most famous book, and I knew she lived in Umbria as well. And I've always been a bit cross-border myself. My mum's Australian. My father actually his mum was born in Australia, so I've always travelled right across the world. My mum also was part French, so we had a house in France in the early 70s at one point. I had family in Italy. So to me, the island of England was always sort of jumping off point to get to the continent. So what I really loved was that this book had that feel as well of crossing borders, of living in different places, and also, of course, the challenge of language. And I think when Will's character discovers what's happened, a little bit like the Madeleine McCann case, which of course, occurred years after this book was written, it's partly because he doesn't understand the language, and he is worried that the police won't understand him, and that his wife might get locked up and he might get locked up, that he does what he does. And I think we all relate to that sense of not being able to be understood, and the fear that goes with that. And I think in a strange way that also has a lot to do with what's going on today. I think so much of the misunderstanding that people have is not just, it's partly because they don't speak each other's languages, but also they just, at the moment, we can't even hear each other.
Yeah.
But I'm digressing a bit. I just really, for me, I'm fascinated by mental health. I'm fascinated by relationships. I felt it would be a really interesting mystery thriller, and that central dilemma, which is what do you do when an impossible choice is put in front of you, is really the stuff of great drama. And I've always loved those films from the 70s, like, Nick Rogue's Don't Look Now and George Sluicer's The Vanishing, and it really had that feel for me. But also the book is incredibly visual as well, and I think images tend to be the things that always spark you. And those central images never really left me, of him alone on a beach in the dark, digging.
You mentioned that you read the novel at the Bay of Silence. Tell us a little bit about the Bay of Silence, because I'm one of those people, if I see a location in a movie and I fall in love with it, I go on holidays to there whenever I can, and this is definitely on my list now. What is the Bay of Silence like to be there?
It's just lovely. The Bay of Silence is in Liguria, which is about 2 hours from my house in Italy, where I am sitting right now. It is just at the end of Cinque Terre, which is this very famous coastline of little villages that you can't really get to unless you go by boat or you walk. So it's a very famous walking path as well. The beach is a sort of perfect crescent, and around it are these beautiful coloured houses dating from the sort of 17th century onwards. At the end of the peninsula there is an old monastery, which is actually now, we actually had our production office in it, which is great. It's used by the commune. There's these little boats that bob up and down. They're little fishing boats. There's a couple of hotels. You wake up in the morning and it's so silent and beautiful, and you go for a swim, and the water is just traditionally incredibly clear and absolutely calm, partly because of the way the bay nestles between a peninsula and the coast. And it's just really, really magical. And it's Sestri Levante, which is the town in which it is actually also a well-known beach town for the Italians. So when she says it's a two-faced place, the book actually opens. Is this your Zoom or my link?
This is my Zoom, yeah, my link.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, look, let's just move on.
Okay.
I can't see you.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about, before you said that, about mental health, and of course this film touches on schizophrenia, but also postnatal depression. How much research did you actually have to do into the mental health aspect of this film?
Quite a lot, of course. I went through various drafts, and there were various drafts where I really concentrated quite hard on her storyline of her journey. But the issue is you also have to look at the wider brief of the film, and we did have a lot more that was in the hospital, the sanatorium or sanitarium in Switzerland, and in the end we felt it was probably better to just continue with the actual thrust of the story. So it's very, very hard. It's not, an analysis of a mental condition. Schizophrenia in itself is very much an umbrella term for many mental health issues. Schizophrenia can be triggered by trauma, which in this case with Rosalind it was by a traumatic event, but it can also be latently just in your DNA, and so it's a tricky one, but that's who she is. And I think having talked to a lot of people who had trauma, who'd been sexually abused, and who are on medication, continue to try and deal with the trauma of their past. What happened to her is not unusual. The need to bury your past and not to talk about it with mental health, I think, is the biggest obstacle to be able to get help. People don't want to talk about how they feel. They're terrified that they will be abandoned, and that's certainly the case with Rosalind, that if she doesn't present what she feels is the person that he wants and needs, then she could be left again. So also she was gaslit by the very people who were supposed to take care of her when she was young, and that is really so common.
Yeah.
This kind of gaslighting, we're seeing it right now in our political world right now.
Yep.
We see what's in front of us and people are telling us it's not what we see. That can create real psychological breaks in people's minds.
Yeah. I mentioned in my review that Olga is in Oscar-worthy performance here with this film. When did you know who you wanted to have play that role? Because it is such an intense role. When did you make the decision that Olga was the right person? And in fact, the same for all of the cast, because it comes together so well.
Wow. I'm so glad, because it's from his point of view, and in order to write a thriller, you do have to have it through the eyes of one person, and we did kind of really look at that, but also because she's holding on to secrets, you can't know too much about her. So Olga had to find a way to show so much backstory in a very little kind of just basically in who she was, just in her being. And she has, as an actress, the ability to go from 0 to 100 in a minute, which is just fantastic. She was working with my husband on The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. My husband's a cinematographer. He works with Terry Gilliam. And he said, you should... she's a wonderful actress, you should take a look. And I'd seen her work because she's also part French and she does a lot of art movies in France. So I knew she was more than just the Bond girl that she gets labelled with. And I sent her the script and asked her if she'd be interested, and she just said yes. And she waited for a year for me, and I know would be delighted to have you say that she's had huge praise for her performance, and I think it's so delicate at times and so subtle as well, and what she can, the emotion that can just go across her face. She's a true film actress. That, you know, she can tell a story with just looking at you with her eyes, and that is a gift. You know, it really is, and it was a gift to the film. Claes I saw in the square, and thought that he'd be very right. I wanted Will not to be someone who was traditionally English, because the English are always defined by their accent and their class to a certain extent, and I wanted Will to be classless. But generally, if you want a classless person when you're doing a British movie, they're either Welsh or they're Irish or they're Scottish or they've got a South London accent, so they're not classless.
Yeah.
Brian, of course, is an old mate. We've worked together at the Royal Shakespeare Company since 1985, and he, as I always say, is my secret weapon, because everyone wants to work with Brian, and he was just so generous and said, all right, when you get it together, I'll be there for you. And he's just so courageous. He has no fear. So to play a character that, you know, is really, you know, could potentially be quite dark, is he's fine about that. You know, he was Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
But also the great thing about Brian as well is you never really know, because he's done so much work, is he can either be a goodie or a baddie, or he can be in between. You know, you never know with Brian. You don't necessarily think that you don't know who you're going to get when he turns up on screen, and that, of course, is what you really need as a filmmaker when you're dealing with quite controversial characters. So I just got really lucky in that respect, and they all responded to the script, and of course Paula van der Oost, who is a wonderful director. But I want to also shout out to my producers. You know, I along the way met some extraordinary people who was just so behind this film. Cheyenne Kane at Vigilance Entertainment. You know, without her, there was some real sort of stumbles just before we went into production, partly because of timing, because of the actors' schedules, and she just stepped up every single time, and she's just a wonderful woman and extraordinary producer, and just very, very supportive. Dan Friedkin of Imperative Entertainment, and then Sandra and Toby Oaf, who I actually met at a charity do in Texas, and Patrick Beharel, who I met in Cannes, is a writer but also a CEO of a big company, but just loves movies. And these people are just as much filmmakers as the people who are boots on the ground. And I do say that over and over again, but I believe it, because independent film is just so hard to put together. We have to pre-sell that film to a number of territories to prove that it's sort of market ready. Then, you need the equity portion and the grant funding and the tax credits, and it all kind of, molds together and turns into a finance plan and a budget, which my great mate Peter Gard, who founded Zentropa, taught me all about finance plans. And without that side of things, you're not going to get the creative side. So I do think the great thing about movies is that, we watch a story, but it's just so many people who have come together to help make that story. Unlike, of course, reading a book where it tends to be just from one person's imagination, and then you just hope someone will publish it.
Definitely. I'm going through all that at the moment, because we're actually in the middle of just about to launch a new web series at the moment. So, yeah, it's been getting everybody on board during a pandemic has been a little bit of a journey. So, yeah. Well,
congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I have to say congratulations again. I know we're running right out of time. I just wanted to say congratulations on such an amazing film. I know a lot of people out there are going to love the film in Australia. So, again, congratulations. And thank you so much for chatting to us today.
Well, thank you. Just want to shout out to all my wonderful family, or in the Messengers and the Islands, in Sydney, and then I've also got my cousin Basil in Melbourne, all my friends, Joanna Murray-Smith and Joss and PJ and Sue Maslin and Rebecca Gibney and Lily Sullivan and, you know, all my mates. And I'm just so sorry we can't all have a red carpet moment together. And thank you for being so supportive. You know, I mean, I even had Rebecca Gibney was helping me out with some casting ideas in 2014. I mean, it's you know, it takes a lot of people. So good luck with yours. If you need any help, let me know. You know, we all have to kind of band together basically as filmmakers, and especially in this pandemic time, just keep it all going. People do want to have stories, and they don't necessarily just want the popcorn stuff. So, you know, as someone said to me, this is also a good glass of red wine.
Definitely. Well, Caroline, thank you so much. I'll let you go. Have a great day, and hopefully we get to chat again in the future.
I hope so too. Take care.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.